It's caring and conquest. Let's play RPGs done right. War games and gaming. We're storming the chains of tonight.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Come on, come on, come on. Get off the screen, you piece of shit. He's stealing your jokes. Oh, hello, hello. Oh. Okay, who we got? Anybody? Come on. Jesus Christ. Anybody there? Fucking hey, how's it going, guys? Yeah. So, wanted to talk about the. Sorry, I was hitting buttons. I wanted to talk about the war games and RPG thing. I see a lot of people talking about that, and oh, that's these two things. And uh, I really don't understand why this myth persists. So I'd like to discuss it a little bit if anybody ever comes in. So we'll see. Hey, how's it going? Yeah. So I put this together about the wargaming, the false divide. I'm not really well put together. There we go. Why war games and role playing games are the same activity and always have been. The claim that war games and role playing games are fundamentally different forms of play is not merely incorrect, it's historically inaccurate. The distinction is a late artificial taxonomy imposed decades after the fact by designers, marketers, and hobbyists who misunderstood the origins of both traditions. When examined through primary sources, original rule sets, and contemporary commentary, it becomes clear that role playing games emerge not as a rupture, sorry, I had an eyelash in my eye, but as a good continuation of it. Is there anybody here? I'm not reading out loud to myself. I'm just not doing it. Okay, so there is somebody here. Kriegspiel was a form of role playing as much as anything else, as wargaming. The separation between RPG and wargame is not grounded in mechanics, materials, procedure, or player behavior. It's grounded in misrepresentation. Kriegspiel never was just a war game. Von Reiswitz did not design Kriegspiel as a board game, nor as an abstract simulation, nor as a mathematical exercise, as many people like to describe it as such, because it actually does have some math like every other game ever made. In this hobby. He designed it as a training method for officers to think, decide, command, and act under conditions of uncertainty, and to do so role playing as a commander in the field or in the staff that they weren't. They were assuming a role, they being the cadets that were being trained on the system. From its inception, Kriegspiel contained all the elements modern hobbyists insist define role playing games: individual decision makers acting through assumed authority, a referee with hidden information, asymmetric knowledge, interpretation rather than calculation. Contrary to popular beliefs, just because it had two hit tables and uh, mechanics for combat doesn't mean the interpretation was as stringent as displayed or discussed in the kind of false dichotomy between rigid and free. Um, it did have campaigns, narrative continuity between sessions, just like RPGs. Consequences would persist beyond a single engagement, just like RPGs. They are always the same thing. Same. So um, that's a part of it. Now, I'd sure like to see somebody come in and talk. Any comments, questions, um, replies? Uh-huh. Nope. Okay. So we'll continue then. The referee in Kriegspiel and in role playing was not an arbiter of he was a physics machine. Um, Dice were not just resolving combats; they stood in for friction, fog of war, and chance. Uh, Orders were issued verbally and in writing. Misinterpretation, delayed, or ignored based on situation. This is an embodied role assumption. Role assumption is the core mechanic. The central act of role playing is not character sheets or dialogue voices. It is decision making from within assumed position of authority and knowledge constraints. Kriegspiel players did not play pieces. They commanded units. They did not ask, "What are my stats?" They asked, "What does my subordinate know? What can I reasonably order? How will terrain affect movement? What might what might the enemy intend?" This is role play in the strictest sense, thinking as someone else with limits imposed by situation and information. Modern RPG theory retune, uh, retune. I'm sorry about my lack of ability to enunciate today. Maybe I should just slow down. Modern RPG theory uh, misidentifies acting as role playing when historically the term referred to role assumption, not performance. The Prussian officers, as I said earlier, were not pretending to be soldiers. They were officers temporarily operating in a simulated space with an elevated rank as they were playing senior officers when they were junior cadets. Excuse me. Maps, miniatures, and charts are narrative devices. The claim that war games are mechanical, while RPGs are narrative, collapses instantly under scrutiny. Jeez, I'm having a lot of trouble with the speaking today. I'm so sorry. I don't know why. Kriegspiel maps were not game boards. They were diegetic terrain representations. Miniatures were not tokens. They were positional markers standing in for real forces whose true status was often unknown even to the players controlling them. Well, and then that's it. Sometimes it's scale, but uh, because everybody has, well, not everybody, but there was a huge push towards skirmish because of perceived complexity and inability to field armies in a relative play session and such. They went down to skirmish, and uh, so the scale becomes also something that is malleable and portrayed between both. If you play something like Squad Leader or some of the skirmish miniature war games of the past, um, Moorhauscher, he's Joseph Moorhauscher. He wrote about this in the late 50s and early 60s, where he was taking toy soldiers, 32 or 132nd, 54 millimeter toy soldiers, and giving them names and giving them individual stats, just like a character sheet. How much can you carry? Maybe you can throw a grenade a little farther than the other guy. Maybe you can run a little faster than the other guy. Things like that. Maybe you shoot a little better. Um, Giving them that individuality and even names in some cases, just like a character, because he decided to play some skirmish war games, where it was 5 or 10 men against 5 or 10 other men, maybe that kind of squad leader scale, maybe a tank in there for good measure, stuff like that. But and that would be a one for one thing. But yeah, in general, there really is no difference at all. But this just keeps coming along. There's all these people that just continue to insist there's this giant. I think one of the things that happened is when commercials became, or excuse me, I don't know why maybe I should be checked for cranial damage. Uh, Commercial war games started to stop discussing an arbiter. And that's something that makes wargaming a lot more satisfying, is to have a referee. But uh, paying, you know, whatever they were back in the 70s and 80s, anywhere between $5 and $15, and some even more expensive, which was big money back then. You didn't want to pay for that and then be a passive observer while you refereed for two other people. So they stopped talking about that as much. And it kind of made its way out of rule sets by the time the mid 80s came around. So you have this conception by people that are a little bit younger that, oh, it's just a giant complicated game of chess where two people battle one another. They were never really meant to be that way. And they play a lot better if they aren't that way. If you have a team, just like Kriegspiel, a team on either side and arbiters to take, you know, deal with fog of war and such. So uh, that's very much the case. And it really is a focus on, let's see, where did I, maps, miniatures, and charts, narrative devices. Um, Charts did not replace imagination. They constrained it in service of plausibility. Um, the famous tables for movement, visibility, fire effect, and morale did not tell players what happened. They told the Emperor what might plausibly happen, after which judgment was intervened. Again, a physics engine. That's what you are. Arbiter rules a physics engine for the thing. That's what the Empire does. So, in my opinion, the most damning evidence against the whole war game RPG divide is the absolute centrality of the referee. Kriegspiel without an umpire does not function. Yes, modern war games can, but then you get the whole, well, these were too difficult to play. They were, somebody sits down with something like Fire in the East. There was a gentleman that said today, I bought Fire in the East, I believe it was. No, it was Nacht Osten, and a little bit earlier, but a giant war game. Said, me and my brother bought that and we could never finish it. Yeah, it was you and your brother. That game could fit on a queen size bed. You needed more people, and in order to make it very interesting and functional, an umpire of some sort would help. It makes things move faster. It also makes things more engaging and more interesting. with less rules. So I think another reason why everybody talked about wargaming becoming too complicated, because when they rifled out umpires, the duties of the umpire had to be covered with more rules, and that just caused the weight of these games to become much larger, and sometimes seemingly too much to deal with between a couple of players. Understandably so. Bring in the umpires, and you'll have a much better um, time of it. So, and then they get into the free Kriegspiel issue, and there's that gets further into the detail of Kriegspiel itself. But yes, there is uh, the idea that you don't necessarily need to have every situation spelled out in a rule book if you have a DM that has a little bit, or umpire for games, that has a little bit of knowledge and experience and can make those judgment calls credibly and consistently on their own without the use of rules. And the free Kriegspiel stuff was that. It wasn't some rule zero elimination of structure. It was just lightening the load. So another big myth that Braunstein invented, or the what's his name? The individual that came up with Braunstein invented role playing. The modern myth claims that role playing began with Braunstein in the late 60s, early 70s. Um, but what Braunstein did was remove the uniformity of command, not invent role assumption. Players already understood to act with roles because they had been doing so in war games for generations. Um, Braunstein merely fragmented authority, and it was not the first time that was done either. If you go back to H.G. Wells, and even farther back to people like Robert Louis Stevenson, who was an avid wargamer as well, you'll see that they had those kinds of civilians and multiple vectors of uh, objectives in their games, and that was century and a half prior to Braunstein. So, but as was noted by Jason, it does, the change of scale is a big contributor to that. So you can, and a lot of people look at Dungeons and Dragons as a role playing game, and understandably so. But and the case is made that earlier versions are more applicable to this than later ones, and that very well may be. But that's again a design choice more so than anything else. But Dungeons and Dragons is a tactical war game with individual units, turn structure, movement rates, line of sight, hit probabilities, morale rules, timekeeping, education by a referee. That that spans across all these types of games, um, with the exception of referee, as we talked about, that sometimes get eliminated. Um, so, and the idea that they go from engagement to engagement is another argument that a lot of people that say RPGs are different make. But there again, that's just not understanding or conveniently admitting that campaigns in war games were always a thing, and um, having consequences go from battle to battle um, started on day one. So that's one of the other uh, big deals there. So there really is no mechanical, procedural, or historical boundary between these games, other than what's previously been discussed, in that marketing sometimes drove this perceived wedge between the two, because they began minimizing the idea of having an arbiter in war games. Um, so it's the bottom line broke down thing is, a lot of people say, well, RPGs evolved out of, um, or that war games gave birth to role playing games. But they always were role-playing games. They are functionally the same thing. Um, so it's just a lot of taxonomy, misunderstanding, and what you have a lot of is what I call hobby folklore, which is mistaken for history. There's a lot of legends and myths and uh, repetition of these uh, false premises, and it all kind of balls up into this folklore that people take for history. So some of the reading that you can do to look at this in a further depth is uh, Ron Reiswitz, the creator of Kriegspiel himself, Duvernay, which is usually associated, he is usually associated with the Free Kriegspiel. Another fellow is Meckel, um, Showalter, the wars of German unification. So it discusses Kriegspiel in there. Um, Peterson, Playing at the World. Um, that's a documentary that gives a synthesis, not really a theory. So let's see what else. Anything else? Questions, comments, rebuttals out there? Anybody? All right. Hmm. Okay. Well, that is the beginning of the argument. It's a brief and somewhat accelerated walk through it. Uh, I I probably erred on the side of going fast to keep it going instead of maybe being a little more clear. I tripped over my words a couple of times, but I think that the general gist is received, and I was expecting some rebuttal, as there usually is. Um, but anywho, I don't know where this where some of these other statements come from. I was going to ask permission to play some arguments that say that there's a difference between the two, but I wasn't able to secure that permission in time for this broadcast, if at all. But another group of citations that you can look at are Peter Purla's book on wargaming. Peter Purla is, or was, I believe he's passed away, um, an avid wargaming aficionado and lobbyist, not in the pay me for, but lobby to get wargaming as part of the curriculum in the Navy for a lot of years. His Art of Wargaming, a guide for professionals and hobbyists, is a comprehensive book that bridges the gap between professional military wargaming and recreational wargaming, offering a historical overview, theoretical principles, and practical guidance for both audiences. It's a fascinating read, and he talks deeply about the origins of wargaming and brushes upon some of the things that were being talked about here. Yeah, that's probably the case. There'll be a lot of that. So we'll have to see. But yeah, I you know, and with, let me say it, these domain games that are becoming more popular with a lot of people, these large campaign worlds that have multiple vectors of objectives and intention with multiple players, that in and of itself is really a display of how all of this works together. You got your mass battles with the military in the in these, like I run one with Star Wars, just an example. You've got the rebellion, you've got the empire, both military forces. Both are conducting, well, the rebellion is more of a counterinsurgency, but it's still got some overt military force. The empire is just this raging juggernaut of military might, but both are also conducting clandestine operations, trying to find dissidents or spies that are the ones looking for the dissidents in rebel cells, diplomacy, trade, uh, and then you combine that all. So you have missions of individuals that may be more what traditional RPG people see or think of as an RPG, where you have a small group of individuals on a mission, say to secure trade rights with a neutral planet. But maybe the Empire has gotten wind that this mission is there, and they're sending some of their people to stop your people from making contact with the neutrality or something like that. So there you have your RPG deal. But maybe it's something where an Imperial fleet has intercepted, some rebel blockade runner or something like that, like the beginning of the original movie. Then you have an actual battle. It's more wargamey, but in both instances, there's people controlling these forces, whatever the scale may be. 20 or 30 ships in a fleet, or half of a dozen people on the forest moon of Endor trying to blow up a bunker, something like that. It all ends up being the same thing, same mechanics, same attitudes. Everything's all the same. Just like you say, scale. So some of the counter arguments mentioned, at least that I foresee, is people coming up with is RPGs require a story or narrative. War games do not. RPGs require characters. War games are about armies. These are some of the counter arguments I hear. RPGs require progression, XP, and leveling. War games do not. War games require winning and victory conditions. RPGs do not. War games are rules, tables, and math. RPGs are free-form acting. And Kriegspiel is for training, therefore it's not an RPG. So addressing these or any other that people want to posit to the forum here, just go one by one, is what I think is a rebuttal for them. RPGs need narrative. War games don't. This claim confuses narrative output with narrative intent. Professional wargaming definitions don't define war games by miniatures or hexes. They define them by people making decisions inside an artificial universe whose state changes because of those decisions. Incidentally, that's how I and most of the people I've ever played a war game with would define a recreational war game as well. The U.S. Naval War College explicitly quotes Peter Perla, as the author I brought up earlier. A warfare model or simulation that does not involve the operation of actual forces, in which the flow of events affects and is affected by decisions made during the course of those events by players representing the opposite sides, the opposing sides, I should say. That the flow of events is literally the game's emergent narrative, something you hear a lot mentioned in RPG lingo. It's not optional fluff. It's the product of decisions under constraint. The Naval War College's Wargamers Handbook reinforces the same core idea. Wargaming is a human decision-making and translating what happens in play into meaning is an art, not a purely quantitative process. So, in summary, war games do generate narrative, and in the case of a lot of recreational war games, there is a narrative already, as mentioned, Star Wars being one of them. You know, this happened before, cue the crawl, and the music. Here's what's going on. Here's the story now after you get the kind of backstory from the yellow crawl. Uh, and again, as I said, a lot of times it is character scale versus formation scale, but not always. If you play Battle System or ever played it from AD&D times, you could bring your character onto the battlefield. It could be he or she, I should say, could be a individual conducting their own operations on the battlefield, or they could be um, leaders of troops. So, number two argument that I hear, uh, RPG requires characters, war games, or armies. This is, this again, it seems somewhat repetitive, but I hear this a lot. Unit of play argument, simply scale. Um, but all the same is different. And again, consider yourself as the commander of the forces in a war game as a character in of itself. You're not playing you necessarily. Well, I mean, you sometimes you can say that for fun, but usually you're assuming the role of, you can make up a name. It's not always historical. Played a lot of Civil War games, and you end up, being Stonewall Jackson because that's the level of command of the game, and that's the time, or maybe um, insert whatever favorite general you have from that area. But a lot of times you're just being, you know, Joe Sixpack from the Second Armored Division somewhere, commanding First Battalion, 16th Infantry, or something like that, and that's you, and you may be represented on the field or on the game board, or perhaps not. But either way, you as a character are influencing things. If your character isn't on the board, it's back at the tactical operations commander at headquarters or whatever, then you're still exerting your influence as that character over your troops by sending them orders and giving them planned objectives and such. Um, so the role assumption is not theater kid acting; it's operational role play. Early D&D confirms the continuity. Excuse me. Men in Magic is literally dedicated to fantasy wargamers who played and expanded chainmail fantasy rules. So yes, many RPGs focus on one person. Many war games do focus on units, but nothing about that creates a new species of game. Um, this is a big one. RPGs need progression, XP leveling. War gamers don't. Progression in campaign uh, is a campaign bookkeeping feature, not a defined trait. Now, there's a lot of games that do have um, a form of leveling. I had that with Battletech. I don't recall if that was a house rule or not, but you did have skills that you rolled for as a character, and they were variable. And in some cases, they could be improved. This also occurred with Dawn Patrol, Advanced Squad Leader, Patton's Best, and a variety of others where uh, your your men would gain experience, and that experience would be translated into either increased effectiveness or in some cases new abilities. Right. There's a lot of other um, individuals on the field type of thing. Um, so if you want to define RPG as games with leveling, um, that's there's plenty of examples to counter that. More that I can't get off the top of my head, but go through some catalogs of games of the past and you'll see that. Number four is wargamings require winning and victory conditions, and RPGs don't. Well, a couple of things. first of all, even professional wargaming doctrine, at least at times, have rejected the idea of war games as winner calculators. Then back to the Naval War College handbook explicitly notes that analytical results are not recorded in black and white and are not solely uh, quantitative. There is value in the process and insight from the decisions made. Um, there's another argument to be made. The RPG side, many RPGs do have winning conditions. You either survive, achieve a mission, recover an artifact, escape dungeon, whatever it is. Um, they're not always scored with victory points. They're not always anything other than, hey, we solved it. But the idea that it is uh, an objectiveless game is incorrect, as many of them do. Uh, have that in a variety of different forms. And again, just because they may be slightly different in form, they're still uh, the same basic thing and don't really make the case for them being separate entities, just different scenarios and varieties. And then there's this one. Well, war games are just run by old fuddy-duddies that like charts and math, and RPGs are free and creative and such. Um, and this is actually historically backwards because you can get into Kriegspiel, uh, the free Kriegspiel with Verdi du Vernon, and I know I keep pronouncing that in different ways. Me and the French, the tongue twists, but the umpire is essential because reality has edge cases and uncertainty. Um, there's always going to be something that comes up that might not be covered by the rules, and experienced referees can take care of that. So the charts are just tools, but the math is needed. Whether you're comparing a paladin versus an orc, or you're comparing third armored versus the 25th Yager Division or something as such, at its heart, mathematics and numbers are about comparison. And there's really no way to get around that. And even systems that hide the math from you are simply assigning some sort of non-math seeming um descriptor to hide the fact that there's some sort of mathematical calculation, no matter how complex or simple that mathematical calculation is. It could be, you know, you hit on a 5 or 6, or it could be THACO, but it's always there. Um, Modern professional summaries of wargaming still emphasize that wargaming is fundamentally about humans making decisions in artificial universes. Again, kind of repetitive, but still true. It's not about just crunching numbers. It never was. Um, and conversely, early RPG, especially D&D, was never free-form acting. It was a game with its own physics engine, and it was about those kind of same war game elements, rules, miniatures, figures, playing area, terrain, and chance factors that influenced how things played out. So RPGs did not invent rulings. Umpired wargaming already had that, and that was in the 19th century, the 1800s. War games did not lack narrative. They generate event chains through decisions, and both mix procedure with judgment. 6, Kriegspiel is training and not a game, therefore not an RPG. That's kind of a lame one, but I've seen it a couple of times. It's just a category error. Use case does not change the structure. The fact that somebody uses for training, or the fact that some people use D&D for therapy or something like that, that doesn't make any difference one way or the other. It's kind of a pretty disingenuous and flat argument, frankly. There's the idea that, well, war games are historical and about reality, and RPGs are often about fantasy. Um, if you want the cleanest historical needle, Early D&D's own text treats its audience as fantasy wargamers and points to chainmail as the foundation. Of course, chainmail was based in historical wargame rules. That means the hobby's most commercially important RPG launched itself as an extension of wargaming culture, not a separate universe. For a modern scholarly synthesis of that, the emergence from wargaming or RPG from wargaming, John Peterson's Playing at the World, MIT Press, is a great reference for that. So that's just a few of the arguments that I hear that I listed out from memory to address. Um, so it's really a myth that keeps on coming. The bottom line is a war game, as a professional doctrine defines it, it's as a decision-driven simulation. There's another thing. Simulation doesn't mean bad or complex. And it doesn't mean the reality that we're in now. You can simulate uh, a fantasy element with the proper description. There is, and again, my pronunciation may be wrong, but Grate Wormus was a tome that was written by Gary Gygax just prior to D&D coming out, and it laid out details about dragons, their size, their weight, the breath weapon thing, all came out in this kind of encyclopedic tome about different varieties of dragons. It talked about bone structure and density of bone, and with that, even though it's a creature that is never really existed, when you make something up with enough detail, you can put that into a simulator. I'm not talking about playing simulators for fun, but you can put it in a simulator and simulate it. And simulation doesn't mean ultra complex. It doesn't mean $28 million machines at Fort Knox or at Red Flag or anything like that. If you have gravity, weather, uh, wind resistance, things like that, that in and of itself is a simulation. It's not about complexity. It's about trying to emulate reality. So, yeah. Some of the other reading on this, a couple other places I went through. The UK Wargaming Handbook from the British government. Perla wrote another interesting thing called the CNA, Gaming the Gig, a brief manifesto about players' decisions in artificial universes. The actual Kriegspiel manual and an 1846 Kriegspiel manual that came from the French called Vertraut. Chainmail, Men in Magic, and Duvernay's discussion on Kriegspiel circa 1876. Also, Gygax's what was it called? Playing at the World? I think I got that wrong, but I did peer into that a little bit too. So those are a couple of the arguments made. So now that I got that out of my system and have it under recording, just kind of hang out and talk to, well, how did I lose all these people? I had a ton of people. Where'd they all go? Oh, yeah. See what else we can do with the night now that I've up and fired up. Let's take a look. Anybody still got any other comments, questions, discussion points, anything like that? While we're here. Excuse me while I duck off camera for a second. Just picking something up. So one question I have for people, if there's anybody here, I have a small kind of technical snafu on my mobile device. The background that's showing is not the background that I chose or I see. What do you see on the background? My background is it's fairly blurry, and that maybe that's why. But it's an old picture of BattleTech. But when I look at my mobile, it's a map, a two-color map, brown and blue. What do you see? And I wonder how I can rectify that. If anybody knows, I would appreciate the tech support. So, comments, questions, challenges to my assertions. Any other discussions? I know I got a leggy computer, so oh, you do see two mechs. Thank you very much. Okay, so yeah, that's some of the more interesting stuff for the wargaming, and I do like to play these games when they have a mixture of everything in them. It's much funner to play in a large, encompassing world that kind of spins on its own axis, and things go on whether the players have input or not, and they can function as they see fit. Doesn't mean they don't have something to complete. It's not completely rudderless. You might have, I play BattleTech 1, and it's pretty combat heavy. It's mostly it's fourth succession war stuff. So but it does have role playing elements too. Um, I do it with just sometimes just a domain system with a hex crawl is fun to do this way. So, uh, but either way, they always encompass stuff from both sides, both RPG and game role playing. So, one of the other things that I wanted to tease, I found something. I'm interested to know how many people know about this. Um, and again, me and pronunciation, I really do need to work on that better. But um, are you familiar with the Voynich manuscript? So that's my next assertion for one of these videos, is that people are misunderstanding what the Voynich manuscript is. That's weird about the thing with the map. Really odd. It's the second time that's happened. But yeah, I was playing BattleTech last time, but I want to talk about the Voynich manuscript next time. So, welcome in. We got some more people. I don't really promote these as well as I should, so I'm always kind of hoping people just ramble in and say hi. But that was my next big deal. If you're not familiar with the Voynich manuscript, it was discovered in 1912 by a Polish American rare book dealer. Here we go. Here we go with the pronounces. Oh, Wilfred. Okay, that's easy enough. He found the 15th century indecipherable codex inside a chest at the Villa Mondragone in Italy, where he purchased it as part of a collection from a local theological college in the area. And after looking at the description of this and the pictures involved with it, there's archaeologist type of where they describe everything in detail. There's been about 90 years worth, almost 100 years worth of attempts at trying to decipher the thing. Um, Many people believe that it's a hoax, and that the not in that the script itself is fake. It clearly is real, but whoever their theory is, whoever made it, was pulling a fast one on people, pulling people's legs. After I looked at this, I says, "Oh, no, 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 no. I think everybody misunderstands what you have here. What you have here, I believe, is a paracosm, somebody's paracosm. And I think that's fascinating, being that it comes from the 15th century. And paracosm is just a fancy word for imaginary world. And I think that's what this individual came up with. And it's highly, highly detailed. There's been a couple of games made about it already, but those largely um, are about trying to decipher what any of this stuff means. And when people try to decipher it, they're trying to apply it to real world things. Oh, it's not like a section of it is botanical, a section of it is uh, astronomical, and they look at the astronomy and they say, well, this person has it all wrong. Well, do they? Maybe they're not talking about the sky above them. Maybe they're talking about the sky in the world that they're creating. So I'm taking a look at this and thinking that what we have here is a really cool RPG campaign world, and I'm putting that together. So, so I was going to do a deep dive in that for people. It's got I've got some pictures of the manuscript that was taken, such um, constructed into a world to play in. So uh, that's one of the next things. I'm also working on a history of wargaming and a history of. Hey, Doc, there you are. What's up? So, uh, working on that as well. History of wargaming, deeper history of RPGs, things like that. Specifically, one of the things I want to focus when I do the history thing, up and above what I've already done, just here tonight briefly, is pinpoint the big RPG mechanics, um, and document where you can see them much earlier than uh, the mid 70s, because most of them you can. So he's doing some recordings on that too, and it just further makes the case for the assertion here today, where you see hit points and saving throws and things like that infused into wargaming um, from the 1850s all the way into the 1950s, things like that. So, a little bit on the Bronte sisters, if you're familiar with them. They're they're another early version of role play and paracosm. Um, a, a young fellow named Thomas Malkin, which is a fascinating story. Um, Robert Louis Stevenson, we're going to feature him in one of them. H.G. Wells and uh, the Fletcher Pratt rules, and Fred Jane, a whole bunch of people that came up with wargame and RPG stuff way back. So, doing all that, and I got games. So, but anybody have any commentary on the assertion made today? I'm open the floor for discussion if you want it. I like to have a back and forth with people that are watching. So I know some people just like to lurk and such. So nothing more to say. But yeah, It is more than a scale thing, though, but scale has got a lot to do with it. But I've played a lot of one-for-one skirmish games myself, so I've got a couple of sets ready to go. Yeah. Anyway, so other than that, I'm glad I finally got some leverage out of YouTube. Some folks are seeming to have problems getting people to show up for YouTube. They don't seem to like gaming anymore on YouTube or on Twitter. So I saw that the Dungeon Delver was having a very difficult time. I know I have been. Um, I don't know how anybody else has been feeling about it. So anyway, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. Um, just remember that when I do these things, I really do like the conversation. I'm really not prepared to just to stand in front of a pulpit and give a lecture for any lengthy period of time. I like to open the floor to a back and forth. I do have the ability to bring people up and have interviews and discussions face to well, camera to camera, or whatever. Come on, speak live instead of having to fight through typing and such like that. Um, but when I turn this thing on, I usually do it for quite some time to see who comes in and out. I can have conversations with. So, thing like that. So, you guys both play in the domain game, or we're playing in the domain game if you're still here that I was running? Because that thing kind of, I was waiting to fire that back up. But it's been spotty as far as where things are going with people. And if they can still play, one individual says, "Hey, I never got a chance to play. Things overwhelm me." Are you guys playing, or we're playing in that? We can discuss that a little bit. Or am I talking to the wind? I can never tell how many people are in here. Sometimes it tells me, but sometimes it lies to me as to who's in or if there's anybody in or active participant. Yeah, no, it says no. It says nobody's here, so I guess I've rambled past people's tolerance level. But here it says there's 3 people. Well, it might just be me. Well, if you're not playing in that one, we've got other things to play. Well, oh, movement. Something moved. Oh, that's me. Oh, are you playing? Are you playing in the domain game I'm doing? I got several running. The one I've been doing, I was doing was Mysteria. It was called Empire's Mysteria. It was a domain game set in um, uh, Mysteria. Me and talking today, Mistra from Beckme. I took the old known world map. Oh, okay. I've been looking for the guy. It was one of those things I played, and then the holidays come along, and of course everybody's got commitments during the holidays, and then trying to reconvene everybody at the same time, it's can be difficult. And after a few weeks, people kind of forget about it and all that. So let's just try and put it together. But so yeah, that's what else we got going on. What was the other thing? Well, I'm making my own game, but who isn't? There's that. What other discussions we've been having? Let's see. Uh, Just mostly, philosophy, different play style, stuff like that. Been talking a lot about that. Oh yeah, cool, cool, cool. Uh, yeah, I that's neat. Face to face. Unfortunately, those days for me seem to be past. There's nobody here around to play with. My old guys are either married with children and too busy, or they've deceased. That's cool. What's your campaigns about? I got an old original D&D one that I put together. Haven't gotten players for that. This one, the domain stuff I do is play by post on Discord with the option of a Discord session should it come into rise. Yeah, mine is well. Here's the thing. I've got that kind of thing around. They're not geared to that kind of game. They're people playing, Go and stuff like that, which is cool. Everybody wants to, play their own deal, but they ain't really set up for the kind of thing. The only place that's set up for what I want to do is pretty far, pretty long drive. Oh yeah, I did a Greyhawk too. I did one. Um, I set it up for the 50th anniversary, and I got um, the copy of Len Lakofka's playtest map. Decided to run it on that just because it was kind of like a historical relic, and I just wanted to get the totally raw OD original Greyhawk vibe with the little brown books and stuff like that. So normally I'd play something like AD&D or with some of my folks, um, BX. So, but that's cool. Yeah, I like my Greyhawk. So it's been a long time since BX. We jumped kind of into right into Beck Me for a variety of reasons. Yeah, there's a lady named Anna B. Meyer, and she's a cartographist, and she's a huge Greyhawk um, aficionado. She makes all sorts of stuff. Does heraldries for Greyhawk too. Beautiful artist. And on her site, she had um, a copy of Len Lakofka's playtest. It was a hand drawn map that he had in his office, and she had access to some industrial scanner. So it's a high quality, high resolution um, copy of this thing. It's big. It's much bigger than Darlene, um, and some of the geography and things are a little bit different. Sometimes it's hard to read because it was 50 plus years old and the pen starts to fade away and stuff like that. But it's playable and it's really neat to look at it from a different direction. Oh, okay. So you know him. Oh, okay. So then, yeah, it's the one in his. According to her, it's the one that he had in his map. I assume he used it to make his modules and such. So it just it. I thought, well, this is great. I'm doing 50th anniversary stuff. Why not? Why not get this? It looks like a cool old relic. Really neat. Yeah, yeah. It was neat. So I thought the other thing about it was most people aren't they may be familiar with his existence, but very few of them are familiar with all the changes or the differences and stuff like that. So it just it's like it would be a fresh take on traveling around instead of some of the people I play were deep Greyhawk players, and you know they know Darlene backwards and forwards. So this would be a just kind of a different vibe. So for a split second, Rob Kuhn said he was going to play with me, but he said then he had to cancel out because he got the deal with Microprose. Yeah, yeah. So it's neat. Yeah, she's got it on her site, and you can download it, and Um, when you put that in a something that can handle scaling well, like a Photoshop or something like that, you can get a pretty good zoom in on it and stuff like that. So it's cool. But it was unfortunate that Rob had to back out. It would have been obviously a blast to play with Rob. So, but he got that MicroProse thing, so he had to cancel. But um, but it was neat. He joined my Discord with the Robilar on. I was like, oh wow, this is cool, man. I got Robilar and I got this old Greyhawk map and what a time machine. So um, maybe someday I'll be able to play that out. Um, I played a little bit of it, but I got the feeling that the majority of people that were coming to play were coming to play with Rob. And when he had to cancel, they they found their opportunity to not play. So, which is a little bit, ouch, but uh, that's okay. We'll find people that want to just play someday. Yeah, here's the so it's a pretty wild story, and you might want to check back with me because you'll see a piece of it. I'm going to put out here on my live at some point. My uncle Tony, since deceased, unfortunately, but he worked for um, a company that eventually got bought out by Hallmark, and that company was printing and packaging company. Um, and his accounts. He was a salesman for it. And his accounts included um, TSR, which he had an account with until WotC bought it, and a big one. And the other, he did a couple of Avalon Hill stuff. He had a lot with FASA, and way at the tail end, just before WotC, he picked up some Reaper miniature stuff. So he was making packaging. His company was, and he was selling it and such. So anyway, uh, the Coons connection is Rob got a ride from Elkhorn, Wisconsin to Lake Geneva, and he rode with a salesman, and that ended up turns out that was my uncle Tony, and my uncle Tony told me this story. So anyway, that got me talking with Rob, and that's how he mentioned. He goes, I'm looking at playing again. I haven't played in a long time, and I said, feel free to play with me, and lo and behold, he joins the Discord, but then had to back out. Yeah, it was really cool. So I got all my TSR stuff from my uncle. He always took a sample off, and he had off the line when they were printing it. Yeah. So, and knowing my uncle, him and Rob probably had lunch at a tavern, and you usually get back then. You usually uh, got your lunches at some tavern in Wisconsin, especially out that way, heading west on those roads. So that was pretty neat. So I got a chance to talk with Rob one on one at the Discord for a little bit, stuff like that. Yeah, yeah. I've never, I, I, you know, a handshake and a hello was all I, had from Rob at Gen Con face to face. So what I would do to go to Gen Con is my uncle would hook me up with Mike Martin, which was he was like the VP of marketing or sales or something for TSR at the time, and he was also the corporate officer that was always in charge of Gen Con when TSR was running it. So I'd get comped the 4-day badge to go to Gen Con in Milwaukee every year, and then my uncle would show up because he had just kind of wine and dine one of the you know for sales reasons. So every time Tony would show up, he'd say, "Hey, do you want to meet, the special guest, from TSR?" So I got to meet Gary, and I got to meet Dave, and I got to meet Rob, and I played with Cook a lot because I loved Dawn Patrol, so I always signed up for those games, and never got to meet Len, unfortunately, but I got to meet a whole bunch of them, Zeb Cook and stuff like that. It was really cool. Um, yeah, yeah, it was great. Just a handshake and stuff. But Gary, I got here. So hey Gary, how you doing? I love your stuff. Hey, what are you doing? And he wanted to know what campaign you're running. What are you doing with it? And he was really excited to see, you know, very friendly. And then I'm walking through the Great Hall later, and he recognized me. Hey, and he kind of shouted out to me at the crowd, which was super cool. They're like, "Wow, you know Gary?" I'm like, "I don't know Gary." I shook his hand, but he was really nice about it. And then I came up and talked to him a little bit, and that was a little that was a little bit embarrassing. I had this question. I wasn't real fond of gold for XP, and I really wanted to kind of press him on it, especially the note in the AD&D book. And I just I I saw him standing around again in the Great Hall, and I just figured he was just talking to people and shaking hands. I didn't realize that he was actually talking to he was like giving a talk to about 15, 20 people. It was because it was all congested and it just looked like part of the normal traffic up and down the aisles. So I went up there and I asked him something, and he had a real he could be a boisterous fella. He could really bellow. He had a booming voice when he wanted to be. So I said to him, I says, are you sure this is what about this? I'm not really think this is a great idea. And he he called me out in front of all these people, just kind of, you know, he doesn't like the way I wrote this. Oh geez. I was really embarrassed. He kind of let me have it a little bit. So it kind of squirreled away. Yeah. Yeah. Gen Con was a blast. I really enjoyed being able to, and you got to meet so many neat people. So, um, most of the experiences meeting those people were okay. I met Frank Chadwick, and he was a little grouchy, but uh, I got to meet Dunnigan. He was a nice guy. Yeah, yeah. It it was a lot of fun. I had a ton of great experience. Doohan, being able to meet Doohan, that was a fun one too. James Doohan, Scotty, that was a great one. Um, he he really enjoyed conventions, um, and and when he went to Gen Con, uh, he was in the bar for a while. He also enjoyed a little cocktail. So he was in a bar. There's a bar that overlooked the Great Hall, and I went in there just to wet my whistle and have some lunch. And there's this whole crowd in the corner. Like, why is everybody all every place, all the seats were empty and all the people were crowded into this one at the end of the bar. And I kind of look over. There he is. He's just sitting there having a drink, telling all these. It wasn't a scheduled thing. It was just people just crowded around him, and he was a naturally personable guy. So he was sitting there telling Star Trek stories and stuff like that to a crowd in the bar. Of course, a lot of people there weren't of drinking age at the time, so I snuck in there and got to listen to him tell his stories. God, that was great. What a joy. So nice guy. Um, Told us about the missing fingers. He was missing fingers. He was in the service during the Second World War, Doohan, and and he got a couple blown off by a German machine gun. So that was he didn't go into any more detail on that, but he lost a couple and that sent him home. Yeah, he was great. So you met Len. That's neat, huh? So how'd you get your job with editing with Len? That must be a cool story. Oh yeah. I think it was been put in print. Maybe it was prior to that too. I don't know I don't think he kept it a well kept secret. I know that they uh, when they were filming TOS, they did a lot to make sure it didn't show up on camera though. Oh, that's neat. That's neat. I think was he in the Twin Cities? I thought he was somewhere in central Wisconsin, but maybe it was Twins. Anyway, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So you just like Dragon's Foot or something like that. You just kind of exchange notes with him, and he sends you stuff. And oh, geez. Oh, so he's just trying to expedite. Oh yeah, trying to beat the clock. Oh, ouch. Yeah, well, that's cool. That's cool. You got to you know uh, to help you out. I just okay. Yeah, yeah. I just lost my dad a couple of weeks ago from cancer, so I know how that is. Yeah, and Tony, my uncle that I was talking about, same deal, cancer. So, and is in the same situation. I watched him sadly, at the end, just trying to wrap everything up because he knew it's horrible. So, but that's cool. I mean, you know, being able to have some direct contribution to things is pretty awesome. So, I've always wanted to play his stuff. I saw it being played at Gen Con, but I never got a seat at those tables. But it'd be fun. Yeah, yeah. Game's fast. So, yeah, that lots of the other guy that I went to school with, Scott Palter, that ran West End Games. In the same deal, I kept up with him up to his passing. Now he says to me, he goes, I'm sorry I haven't talked to you in a while, but I haven't been feeling ill. I have been feeling ill, but it hadn't been that long, and he didn't specify as to what the ailment was. So I figured he just, it was bad flu or something. Well, it was a lot more than that, and that was one of the last. That second, I think I got a hold of him one more time after that, and then that was it. Took him real fast. So, but we went to the same private school together from the same area. So he got me. You know, I don't have much in the way of luck these days, but around then, I had some great luck having known Scott. And I got to meet Costigan and Bill Smith and all those guys from West End Games. And I'm a huge West End Games fan. I love both their war games and their RPGs dearly, as some of the greatest material out there. Personally, I'm a big Star Wars fan, so the Star Wars D6 is that's my favorite jam. So, yeah. Uh, really enjoy that one. Uh, but yeah, Gen Con has always been a fun thing. Oh, it's really great. I just I've never up until then I would always sneer at dice pools or bucket of dice, and I it's not my favorite now, but I was like, Scott, I love that you did this. I love Star Wars, but I hate that mechanic. And so, but it grew on me, and it works really good for the neat thing about West End Games is everything is really geared to trying to capture um, a movie thematic experience in the game. So and it works for that. Um, but the the giant dice cup of rolling for shooting, sometimes what I do just to cut that down, because new people kind of go, wow, sure takes forever to pick all those dice out, is I go and I take the miniatures battle, Star Wars miniatures battle, came out in 90, 91, or whatever, and use that combat system, which works perfectly. It dovetails right. It's meant to. with the RPG, and that makes things a little bit slicker and faster to do. But the material is great. Um, and the story that Scott told me about, he goes, we're one of the few people that got to look at the Journal of the Wills and got, kind of an open book into Lucas's stuff. They kind of changed how they did stuff. And to this day, they still pull stuff out of the old West End games, like um, for the Disney stuff, like Andor, you'll see occasionally go, wow, that was in Bantam Books or that was in D6 or something like that. It's really great. Um, so it helps shape the universe of Star Wars, or galaxy more accurately. So that's fun. Um, I played uh, the Ghostbusters once, which is a D6 that came up with Sandy Peterson did that, and it's fun. But I just thought, as fun as this is, I can't see getting into it enough that I would play it multiple times or get into a campaign. It was kind of more of a lark one shot type of system, but teach their own. Oh yeah. Um, and I got the second edition stuff, and it's so complete. I know a lot of people say, well, first edition was quick and easy, but it was very vague and you kind of had to make up a lot of stuff. But when you get into the second edition, it's solid, complete, and when you take stuff out of the old Del Rey or Bantam, EU, and uh, mix it up, a lot of that comes from D6 too. It's great. Like the Thrawn trilogy, I sat in and listened to um, Timothy when he was writing that. He was at the conventions, and um, he said that he was shipped a bunch of D6 material uh, to kind of research that, um, for the Thrawn trilogy, and some of the vehicles in there and stuff like that are pulled out of West End Games material. So I love it. I've got 5 campaigns that I've written for D6, and they range from just after the third episode of third movie. Um, so just and years ago, this was before Disney ever bought it out. I wrote all this stuff, and I took 2 of them are from the X-wing versus Tie Fighter type of stuff. I took those and made RPGs out of them. So I ran one and would love to run it again. Ran one for a year and a half for a group of people, and I did another one for the same one for another group for about 8 months. And um, I would I'd give my eye teeth to get a group together to play that one again. So, but you got to go online. That's, at least I do. I don't have the option of. So you end up kind of begging people. It's like a sales job trying to hook people in to play. um, but yeah, I like that one a lot, obviously, and they made great war games. I played Air Cav and all that stuff with Scott. It's really great. But the price of freedom is something that I'd love to play again too. That came from West End Games. It was kind of a almost comedic uh, action film Cold War thing. Yeah, it's okay. Once you get a group, I played my year and a half Ash Worlds online, and it's harder to find chemistry because you're often strangers and such. Although I've had some face to face nightmares because I used to, you know, go into gaming stores and play in groups where people didn't jive and stuff like that. But it is hard to find a group that gels sometimes. But I was lucky enough that back a couple of years ago, I got a really good group and everybody liked each other, and we ran really great, really successful. A couple of the initial episodes or sessions were so engaging that these people looked, hey, we've been here 6 hours. I gotta go. I gotta go to bed. And I just kind of felt happy with myself that I had enthralled them enough to keep them even past the 4 hour uh, determined time slot. Yeah. So, but just don't know anybody my age that is willing to play my games or anything like that around by me. So, sadly, yeah. So I'm relegated to that. I'm always out there begging for players. Same with wargaming. There again, you can play that online a little bit easier though. Yeah, I I don't know. It's like the place I went to. It just didn't seem like I brought up um, Star Wars Western games, and they kind of gave me this blank stare, like, "What the hell are you even talking?" They're like, "We have FFG over there," and I'm like, "Ah, yeah, no, thanks." It's not. I don't mind. Well, I don't like the custom dice in the FFG. I'm I'm not flush with cash. It just to me, and 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 and, and more than anything, I absolutely love the D6. Why should I abandon what I enjoy, pay a lot more money for something that's iffy, just to slide in with some people that may not, you know, the age uh, disparity might not click, you know. Yeah, yeah. So, um, I don't know. Maybe I'll take it on the road and find people. I don't know. So, there's a couple of places that play D6 still online when you can get people, but and people are very persnickety, and I understand so why. You know, they want all of their stars aligned. Well, you're going to do this, or you're going to play this way, or you're going to play that way, and any little disparity from what they're looking for, they just back out. And at first, I go, boy, people are sure picky if you're looking for something. And then I thought about it from the other direction. You're setting aside time that that is fairly precious, and you don't want to sacrifice it. You know, playing a style that does you don't enjoy. So I can understand people being very uh, selective, which is the same reason I'm not going to go buy FFG. Although I did um, sneak a peeky at the hut stuff from FFG because there was a couple of neat pieces of lore in there, and I went to. Sometimes I travel on the road, and I'll go to a game store that's somewhere out of my distance when I'm on the road, and just kind of see what's neat and new inside. I thumbed through the hut stuff. Kind of took a couple of notes with my. I didn't take a picture or anything like that, but oh, that's a good idea. That's what they call that. Okay, I'm going to write that name down, and I brought it over and took it into my stuff. Yeah, so that's kind of neat. But and now the other thing is I'm in an apartment, which makes things difficult. I used to be able to play micro armor on a 12-foot by 8-foot, you know, train table set that I used to have in my basement of my home. Nope. That all had to go sadly. But yep. Um, and the other big one I'd like to play more of is Twilight 2000. But there's another one. That's like role playing in the Cold War is fictitious history from way back. There's not a lot of people that want to see that sort of thing and play it, but it's another one of my friends, my favorites. Maybe some BattleTech someday, but Yep. So I think I made my case. I really, I don't expect a lot of people to fold in, but I thought a couple people would fold in and here and want to debate this issue a little bit more, but that's okay. So what else do you play other than D&D? You got any other RPGs that you enjoy? See if I can get these folks to come in for me. See what is it? Oh, yeah, Boot Hill's another one. I've got one adventure role from Boot Hill. I never got to play enough of that game. I always loved, me and my dad used to watch old westerns, John Wayne, Clint Eastwood. As a kid, he'd always, like Roy Rogers and stuff. So I loved westerns, and I only got to play Boot Hill, but the Boot Hill I played was pretty much just a miniatures shoot 'em up. I'd love to try to role play it a little bit. I'm a big BattleTech guy. I had Battle Droids. I bought that one, and then the actual BattleTech with the Warhammer on it, and I went wild with that one. Um, I like the fastest stuff. I've got I'm old enough that I have a couple of the CGL things. I've got Total Warfare and Tactical Operations or something like Strategic Operations, whatever it was called. I got those, but I like my Battle Force 2 and my Inner Sphere Battle Mech stuff and all that. So I used to use um, and have it set up to do it now if I could ever get people to play. I would use the board game Succession Wars as a uh, scenario generator for Battle Force 2, stuff like that. Gamma World, I've got a couple of Gamma World ideas, um, but I can't. There's another one I can't get players for, and there's some guy that plays it online here, and he films it. Um, I watch it from time to time, but I never found these games to be that much of a spectator sport. I don't really get into the live watch that much, so I just kind of peer in and look a little bit. But I always liked that. Star Frontiers, that was another one I never got to play. I got to talk online with Zev Cook about that, and I really wanted to play that some more. Um, but the other one that I think would be fun just to try, uh, Gangbusters from TSR. But I'd play that. I'd play anything TSR. I've got it all. I've got the top secret and all that stuff. But I never got anybody to play Gangbusters. Yeah, yeah, Bill. That's the guy. Yeah, yep, yeah. I peer in from time to time and just kind of watch it, but I don't watch the whole thing. I don't keep up with it. I'd rather play than watch. I tried to get in on it, but he already had people lined up and everything, which is fine. The best thing about Car Wars, Steve is was fun to talk to back in the day too. He's very friendly and stuff like that. Um, and I like a lot of his games. So the coolest thing about Car Wars for me at Gen Con was the kit bashing. They would have a, a kit bashing contest, where you'd make your cars, and then they would display them with a paint job, and then they would take them to the Car Wars battlefield and fight out with them, and that was fun to watch. Those guys were really gifted modelers and stuff. It was great. Yeah, yeah. It's really not a spectator thing. I agree, but yeah, Car Wars was fun to watch. I played it a couple of times and stuff like that. There were some games that I just couldn't. Everybody would go, "Oh no, that's too much." Car Wars, most people looked at it and said it was too complicated. Starfleet Battles was another one. Most people go, "Hell, hell, no, 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 I'm not going to play. That's too much." And I really wanted to play more of them. I've got all the Starfleet Battle stuff, except for the miniatures. Yeah, yeah. Always like to design my own mechs, and and I wish I had the money for a 3D printer because it would be neat to make miniatures for all those old mech designs. Um, but I don't have the knowledge for the files, and I don't have the money for the printer. But oh well. Um, but I used to like to do that too. But those guys, the Car Wars thing, that was neat, man. They would all purchase. Some years they did Pinewood Derby models, and they would kit bash those, and then other times they were Ertl models. And then later on, they got into actual Matchbox cars, like metal Matchbox cars that they would kit bash. They would, and it was funny, and they would have a little area squared off where these guys were working on their stuff on a table, and you could just walk by and see their progress, as you were doing your things elsewhere at Gen Con, stuff like that. Nothing be Nothing beats Gen Con. That's my Discord server. What I always hoped for was to be able to, again, because I am relegated to remote, is to kind of have a large, like Bill does, like Delver does, the little online convention of games that he does. That's kind of the kind of thing I did, because Gen Con, everything was always bigger and grandiose. We weren't just playing Car Wars. Well, I didn't do it, but that they were doing it. The real deep. Didn't play Axis and Allies. They had Axis and Allies on a globe one year. The globe was so big you couldn't get your arms around it, and all the pieces were magnetic, stuff like that. The giant battle tech. You ever seen Armor Cast? Or was it Armor Cast? No, those are tanks. Armor Tech or something like that. They made like foot high resin cast battle mechs, and they would have this big setup where you could play. They even had terrain that was the right size. You had to take off your shoes, and you could only step in certain places because it was all laid out on the floor. But it was really cool. Just giant mechs, armor something, armor cast, armor tech, something like that. What was it called? Yeah, armor cast. That's what it was. They were about a foot high. They were neat. Yeah, Axis and Allies. Um, and the designer was there a couple of years running games. He's another one that isn't exactly a highly sociable dude, little bit, um, but that's okay. Not everybody's a little bit different. It was neat meeting them, and but the giant games were great like that. Um, they had, like plastic battleships that you would float, like they were like bath toys, and the planes were little 1/72 metal die cast things, and the soldiers were 54 millimeter. So everything was just, that one was done on the floor. The one on the globe was done with the regular pieces. So yeah. All right, man. Nice talking to you. Have a good night. See. Oh, that's not what. Let me get this. All right. See if we get anybody else. Anybody else in here? Let's see who we can get. Nope. Okay. Dun, dun, dun. Oh. All right. Dun, 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 dun. See if anybody else jumps in here for a while. Maybe I'll jump into a game here. That's what I'll do, maybe. Hmm. Yeah. Oh, cool. What? All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's do this. Hello, hello. Oh, everybody gone. How's that listed? Oh, because okay. Dun, dun, dun. I see what happens. Hello, anybody else in here? No. Load up a game then. Where's okay? Gonna load up the BattleTech. Ah, come on. She can, okay. E. Oh, stupid. Don't be a meanie. See if I can see anybody. Um, you know, bro, we don't really need that. But it's not. Alrighty. Well, let's see. So, BattleTech. I think that's what. Okay. Alrighty. Just playing. Just a random generator type of thing. Well, it's a campaign, but it's the career campaign. It's pretty fun. Oh, time to go to engineering and get an upgrade. What do I want to upgrade? I want to go faster. What do I need to go faster? Improve power conduit and structural repair. Okay. Got pretty wrecked on the last one. Let's see. Where are my mechs at? That snub, I got a snub PPC in this thing and it's awful. Let's see if I can buy my way out of that. Nope. Okay. Really? Yeah. Okay. So I guess we'll have to deal with that for now. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. Big ups and downs. Bum, bum, bum. Why can't I keep this thing on? Oh, I got an idea. What if boom, 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 boom. Loading is slow on this rig? Boy. That's fine. Mm.
First of all, I'm already. First of all, I'm already. The reason I so your carry sees your strength times 15 with its push pull and drag strength times 30. So we look at farmers again 16.6. So if you put heavier, go like 10 yards before I'm done. So 500 is the one I consistently push pull on the sled. Is what my limiting factor is my deadlift. My max is 350.
The hell is that? Hey, you dirty dick cheese. I know. Dirty dick cheese. That's a nice thing to say on damn thing. You're on the fucking channel, you dumb shit. Why don't you just cut it off? Oh well. Just worry. Wait, is there somebody there? No, you're there. Yeah, you gotta be careful here on that. In fact, let's, well, whatever. Okay, just watch my language. Keep forgetting you're on a damn channel. Okay. I do not like why I get these low numbers this close. There's somebody in there trying to do that. That's what they're doing. Oh, gonna get physical with me, are you? Hay is for horses. Huh. All righty. Huh. Well, yeah. Oh, why does this phone keep doing it? Jesus. Ay, ay, ay. Yikes. Ay, ay, ay. Uh, yeah. Whoosh. That's helpful. A little sniping. I don't like that Panther at all. Everybody's aiming at him. Should have got the mod. Nice. Yeah. Leroy Jenkins is coming after the Panther. Ooh, ouch. The only guy left here. Yeah. Got him. All right. Hmm. Mm. Balancing. Okay, I'm back. All right. Yeah. Well, Well, fine. No? Yeah, okay. Well,